Julius Caesar, a soldier-turned-politician, wages the fate of a republic on a winter river. A conqueror writes his own legend, while his enemies write a list of knives. Power swears it will restore order and breaks the world to do it. 10th of January 49th BCE, the Rubicon, northern Italy. Night breath smokes from cavalry mounts. The water is shallow, iron-cold and black as spilled ink. Julius Caesar sits his horse in silence, listening to the creak of leather and the distant clink of standards. Behind him quiver the loyalties of one legion. Ahead of him lies treason or destiny, depending on which senator you ask. He urges his horse forward. Hooves find the stones, the current presses, then yields. Say a small muddy crossing witnessed by frost and quiet tips a nation from argument into civil war. Pull back. Rome is already cracking along old faults, debt and drought, veterans and votes, aristocrats who call themselves guardians, and citizens who call them hoarders. Caesar is not yet the Colossus. He is a young aristocrat with the wrong friends and the wrong luck, marked by Sulla's dictatorship and proscription lists. He slips out of Rome, ransomed by pirates, then returns to track them down and execute them with clinical theatre. He studies in the law courts, learns to make juries lean forward, learns the currency of favours. He climbs the steps of public office with borrowed money and a memory for names. Ambition meets structure in a bargain. Caesar binds himself to Pompey the Great and the money of Crassus, the First Triumvirate, stitched out of need. As consul in 59 BCE, he drives land reforms through hecklers and sacred precedents, making enemies he will meet again with swords. Then he takes a command in Gaul. There, a career that looks like exile becomes a furnace. He finds hills without grain, winters without roads, tribes who do not keep promises, and a map that lies. Logistics becomes his quiet weapon. Bridges thrown up in days, supply lines braided across rivers, legions trained to move when the calendar says impossible. Gaul bleeds him and crowns him. He crosses the Rhine to show he can, then withdraws to show he chooses. He points his ships toward Britain twice and returns with the story he needs, rather than the territory he cannot hold. Through defeats and reversals, he rewrites failure as rehearsal. Then Alesia, 52 BCE. Vercingetorix gathers Gaul's anger behind a wall of men and hunger. Caesar answers by building walls around the walls, a ring of ditch and timber and traps that turn an open field into an iron embrace. When relief forces arrive, he stands between two storms and does not break. The surrender buys him a reputation Rome cannot domesticate. Reputation terrifies those who possess only titles. When his term ends, the Senate demands Caesar disband his legions and return as a private man to face prosecution. He asks for parity with Pompey. They answer with orders. Law, once a fence, becomes a spear. He rides south to the Rubicon and chooses a line with two meanings, a boundary in the mud and a boundary in the mind. He crosses. Towns open their gates. Pompey and the Senate evacuate, promising to return at the head of armies. In Rome, Caesar acts the restorer, opening granaries, keeping courts open, writing clemency into the script of conquest. It is mercy, and it is strategy. War fractures into theatres. Caesar dashes west to Spain to neutralize legions before they find their general, then east to meet the general before he finds his nerve. In Greece, at Pharsalus, smoke coils and dust blinds. Pompey's confident line buckles under a sudden oblique pressure from Caesar's reserve. Pompey flees to Egypt and is murdered on the shore, a gift Caesar finds obscene and useful. Alexandria is firelight, narrow streets, and politics as old as the Nile. Cleopatra enters wrapped in argument and charisma. Caesar fights a city's war to keep a throne balanced, and the Mediterranean takes a breath before the next campaign. If you're gripped by how thin the line is between order and ambition, tap like and subscribe so stories like this find you again. He returns to motion. In Asia Minor, he compresses a campaign into a phrase that outlives the men it defeats. He came, he saw, he decided, then sails for Africa to shatter the last coalition at Thapsus. In Iberia, at Munda, he wins the ugliest of victories and feels, he admits, fear for the first time. Back in Rome, the Republic greets its most efficient administrator and most dangerous exception. He shortens debt terms, expands the Senate, seeds colonies for veterans, tightens the grain supply and orders the calendar remade. The year is repaired with math and astronomy. The sun replaces superstition. The months align with the sky. Of all his reforms, this quiet engineering may outlast the marble. But honors climb like ivy, covering the old brickwork. Statues multiply, priesthoods and perpetual offices settle on his shoulders. At the Lupercalia, Mark Antony performs a crude theatre with a crown, and Caesar, whether sincerely or carefully, refuses it before a watching city. To some, he is a surgeon removing tumors of corruption. To others, he is the tumor, smiling. Senators calculate futures. Men who once begged for mercy now measure it like acid on their skin. Brutus, shaped by stoic duty and family myth. Cassius, razor-minded and resentful, a ring of conspirators who tell themselves the Republic can be put back in the bottle if only the cork is removed. 15th March 44th, BCE, the theatre of Pompey. The air has the softness of early spring. Caesar arrives late to the session, brushing aside a warning note he will never read. He sits. The petitioners crowd closer than decorum allows. Hands hold him by the shoulders, and then the first knife finds a path. Bodies lean, blows multiply, courage fails, and then hardens. He struggles to rise. Cloth tears. A friend's face appears among the steel. Historians argue over words, but not the math. Many men, many wounds, one conclusion. Blood dots the tiles at the foot of Pompey's statue, the fallen general witnessing his rivals end in stone and silence. The conspirators step into daylight expecting applause and hear only echoes. Power does not flow back into the Senate like wine into an old amphora. It seeps into the cracks between soldiers and demagogues. Antony seizes the pulpit and the crowd. Octavian, 19, underestimated, quiet as a knife in cloth, arrives to claim an inheritance of name and momentum. The Republic's paper machinery yelps and shreds. Prescriptions return like a fever. Brutus and Cassius fall at Philippi. The last bitter act plays out on water at Actium, as Octavian dismantles Antony and Cleopatra, power, and writes the prologue of empire with sails and patience. What began as a crossing becomes a road. The title Caesar detaches from the man and becomes a rank, in Latin then in the mouths of emperors and pretenders, in Kaiser, in Tsar, in the mouths of rulers who do not remember the river but keep its lesson. The city reforms itself around a single point of gravity. Monuments rise, laws harden, poets invent golden ages to explain the iron. The calendar ticks on, counting harvests and wars by the logic he ordered. And somewhere in the imagination of every ambitious man, a shallow, winter-dark stream keeps whispering that the next step is small. The Rubicon at night again, horses steaming, standards shivering, a leader listening to water and risk. History shrinks to boot leather and cold stones. Step, and the world rearranges. Hold, and the world refuses to change. He steps, the current presses, then yields. The hoof finds purchase, and Rome moves with it, toward order, toward empire, toward a century that will carry his name like a verdict and a prayer. If this journey from river to empire stirred you, please like and subscribe to keep these stories flowing.